stuff and jacked up.
Too much.
Making stuff and jacked up. Making stuff and jacked up.
Let it go. You say, get out of the way.
Jacked up.
Get it
Play my
pitching.
music.
And jacked up. Making stuff and jacked up. Making stuff and jacked up. Making stuff and jacked up.
Too much.
Killing me, trust me.
You're listening to Meadows and Makers podcast.
With Jack Dub and making stuff. Peace.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another week of the Meadows and Makers podcast, right here on the MSP Waves. I am a little worn out this week. I was able to bust tail and get down to my property for the first time with the survival trailer and be able to give it some tests and get everything checked out and see how all the systems are running, and kind of like almost like a christening of a ship or something. I don't know. It's like getting out there and testing out all your systems, seeing what was going to work and what's not going to work so well. And so got a few lessons learned from that and checking it all out. Hey, Hypexis little Spiral, I appreciate you coming and join us this morning. So everybody that's in the audience, Global Cobb, Hypexil, Spiral, Peachy Mod, Julia, Rondon, Robbie, thanks for being here this morning with me, guys. And so today, a couple of things I gotta take care of up front. Some things that I kind of forget sometimes, but up front, I just want to do a disclaimer that says that the views and opinions that are expressed on this show are those of myself and my guests, and they do not reflect on the wonderful people and the operation of MSP Waves here, this interactive social media broadcasting network that has been started here on the Peace, Abundance, Liberty Discord, and part of the overall Meadows support project. So thank you for joining, and this show is for education and entertainment purposes. So that's the disclaimer. Throwing it out there. But thank you guys for joining this morning. Any kind of questions or anything that you have during the show, please feel free to type them into the chat in Discord here. If you are watching on Vim, you're going to get to see some more of the links and things that I'm pulling up and through my web browser. And so I'll also be dropping those links in Discord, but if you want to silence yourself here on Discord and then listen through Vim or through mspwaves.com, then you can see some extra stuff that I have going on. All right. So the next thing that I wanted to do, this show is all about resiliency and trying to live a more resilient lifestyle and trying to be, become more empowered as an individual to take the baby steps, just take the steps to get yourself maybe in a more resilient situation, and then, some knowledge on how you can get there. So, and I try to bring on guests and people in that alignment, makers and homesteaders and, kind of self-sufficient off-grid people, different people like that to come and discuss what they have going on. And so, so that's the thing that I want to try to inspire you to be. And so, one of the things that I've created as a mantra for not only myself, but for the show is, I will be an inextinguishable light of possibilities for myself and others. And something to just carry in your heart and carry with you. And you can pick that up and leave it, or just have that in your mind as we go through all this division in our world, and a lot of our what we perceive as tumultuous times, I believe, can be shifted into a more positive future. So, but it kind of takes that mentality to shift in our own minds. And I think one of the big things that can unite us all is good food and, good water, and being able to enjoy the things that happen naturally in abundance on the planet. And we can kind of unite around these things, I think. And so, so these are the things that I want to share, and that's my goal to share with you guys. So today I have a returning guest that's going to be coming on. He's going to be joining us in a minute. I have him pulled into the live on air. He had to go get some lunch, but he will be coming in whenever he's available. But he's another guy that I've had on in the past, and he's another jack of all trades type dude. His name is Professor Bromide, and he is a very interesting character. Used to be a professor and got that tagline, Professor Bromide. And he is into all kinds of stuff. He left the teaching. He left the college industrial complex, the university industrial complex, to go on to other things. And I believe he works in the nuclear field now. And he's a very interesting individual. And also, I believe he's done some, or at least he was part of some presentations for doing some nuclear technologies in space flight. I'll pull up one of his posts here. It was a while back, but it was very, very interesting. So it talks about, nuclear and emerging technologies for space conference that he joined. And they were talking about how they can, be able to integrate some of these nuclear technologies. So hopefully we get to chat with him about that in a little bit when he comes on. And so this is very interesting stuff, getting into nuclear into space. And I know for a long time that these things were kind of banned on the scene. But it looks like there's discussion coming out now about bringing in some of these nuclear technologies to either provide propulsion or even the power for the spacecrafts. So interesting stuff, and looking to talk to him about that. And so, yeah, so just some other stuff that, he's involved with, some little local, he's involved with the local brewery, and also does his own beekeeping and stuff. So that's something that I'm very interested in, is getting my own beehive started so I can start getting some products and stuff going. He's also a member of the Homesteaders Co-op, and where you can get and be able to sell your products on the homestead for Steam. So we'll talk to him. We'll talk to him about that. See how successful he's been with all that. And until he pops in here, I'll just bring up a little bit of stuff that I've been working on, and maybe show you guys some pictures of the first steps I've taken out on my property, and talk a little bit about the first my first night. I only spent a night out there camping out, but that night was pretty intense. We had some pretty intense storms come through Alabama, and we had some pretty high winds and just a lot of rain. But yeah, so I arrived there way before that, probably about noon that day, and just got out and just started working on clearing some trees that I had. And I have this post pulled up, which is my most recent post on getting out there for the first time. So in there you can see my little piece of land. It has, the way it's all laid out is there's a shelf at the top of the land, and then it kind of it really drops off into kind of a ravine and kind of a gully. But it's not, the slope isn't so much that you can't traverse down it or anything like that. You can definitely walk down through the land and everything like that. So the big vision for the property is to build a glamping cabins, and then also have it be a permaculture farm, so that people can come by and do, for instance, the worldwide organic farming initiative. So people can show up to the property and be able to work the land and things like that. So that's kind of the layout. And then some of the things that I learned just from that first night out there was that I'm probably definitely going to need some kind of air conditioning in the trailer, at least in the beginning, for living in it. I do plan on bringing a little camper down to the property and powering the camper off of the trailer. So maybe I won't invest in an air conditioner right away, just use the one that's in the camper. But for traveling around with the trailer, like I want to do, to go to some of these Liberty conferences and share around there, I think I'm definitely going to need some kind of air conditioning in the trailer, just to make it a little bit more tolerable. It was a little bit stuffy in there for the first night that I was in there. Once the rains came, it cooled down quite a bit. But some of the things I was able to test out, I was actually able to test out my atmospheric water collection, aka a dehumidifier, and that was all plugged into the system. And I'm actually making so much solar power with the it's 1.98 kilowatts of solar I have on the trailer, that I can't use enough of the power as it stands for the amount of energy that it's putting in the battery. So I have a little refrigerator, a little light, a little mini fridge, a little light, and the dehumidifier, and then I could run several other things off this system as it sits out there, and be able to power, my power tools and other things I need to use to work on the property. And so, if you see in the frame of the post, you see I kind of maybe lack a little bit of organization, but these are some of the things that I brought down the property in the beginning, and a lot of my tools, a lot of things that are going to stay down there. Some pine shavings for a composting toilet. There's some chairs. There's some old windows I had. There's some tarps, some old tarps, and some old painter's cloth that I can use as kind of low tunnels and be able to shelter some plants in the wintertime to maybe extend my growing season a little bit in the soil gardens. So there's some of that, and then I also have it's a small washing machine actually. It's like one of these RV. They're made for RVs. They're 110 volt little washer, and they can use non-pressurized water flow. So you need a little bit of pressure for them, but I learned about that through my buddy Jack Dubb, that we started this show together, this podcast together. And so it's there's one of those in there, and then you got your battery bank, and then these shelves are intended for a small aquaponics system in the future, and so those are that is intended to house some fish, which I will then transport to another aquaponics system, but then also be able to grow plants and microgreens in the trailer on the road. And so that's going to be one of the final things that I create in there, and one of the things I learned from taking it down to the land this first time is that the roads suck. The roads all kind of suck, and it's really bumpy, and definitely everything that's back there really needs to get strapped down well, so that it's not going to really shift around. My weight distribution was pretty good actually on the road, and I didn't notice the trailer trying to wobble around on me or anything like that. So I think my weight distribution is pretty good, and it hauled down the road pretty well. And so I think that's I got that going for me. But I definitely got some looks as I was traveling with this thing. I pulled into a gas station and got a few supplies before I headed down, and then definitely people want to ask questions about this thing, which is great, and I'm able to just share more about what I'm doing and what my journey is. And so yeah, I got some questions and definitely got some looks from people driving it down the highway. And so yeah, hopefully more people see this kind of stuff and see what's possible out there, and want to come check out what's going on. So yeah, that was the first experience. And then that night the weather got a little rough, but the trailer held up fine. No leaking or anything like that, and held up to the wind with the solar panels deployed. With the I have a couple of steel supports on the thing, and it was able to hold up to the wind no problem. So yeah, it was a successful little trip. And I was also able to work on a water catchment system that I have down there. I have a little 275 gallon tote that I brought down there earlier, and you can find those things on Craigslist deals all over the place. You want to try to look for a food grade one if you're trying to use it for any kind of drinking water source or anything like that. But they pop up on deals a lot, and if you can find them for under $100 for a food grade for one of these 270 gallon totes, then that's a really good deal. And so if you're checking out Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or Let Go or OfferUp, these are some of the places that I found some cheap deals on some of this off-grid stuff. And so yeah, when I got down there, I got to meet my neighbors and actually get to talk to both of them. It's a guy and his wife that are there, and they actually own the 8 acres that's right next to me. And they're the only other ones up there or around in that little area right there. And so, yeah, we got to talking for a while, and they're real big into animals. They do pigs and chickens and goats and all that stuff. So I think we're gonna get along really well, and they actually came over and helped me out a lot. They kind of live self-sufficiently off the land pretty much themselves, and so they're going to be a big asset, I think, and we'll get along really well. They have pretty much the guy that has the property now is the son of, I guess I would say he was a hoarder, but yeah, he definitely stored up a lot of stuff on their property, including old bread trucks. They got tons of boats. They have so many different boats. They have, there's a couple old trailers on their property, lots of tires. And so I'm kind of thinking, maybe we can do some experimentations with some earth ships, with some of the stuff that he has on his property. I don't know. He said he was very amenable to helping me out with some materials and stuff like that from what he's got on his land. His dad kind of left him with this property, and it's kind of just a bunch of junk that was out there. So he's just trying little by little to get it cleaned up. Oh my gosh, man, Rondon. I can't tell you how many there's so many wild blackberries out there. The only thing about the wild blackberries, they all got thorns. So I just have to, pick the bushes that I want to keep, and then, have those areas where you can go and pick those blackberries. But man, I think I got to figure out how to do some like blackberry wine or blackberry brandy or something like that, man. I think that's going to be one of the things that I'm going to do as like a Airbnb plus for my guests, and try to make my own blackberry spirits, and then and be able to provide that as like a little plus, because I want to do these little glamping cabins down there. So that's one of the first man. That I am. That's for my guests. No, I definitely I don't totally abstain from drinking, but only during occasions, special occasions, and then when I'm around friends and stuff like that. But I did have a hard time with it at one point in time, and I did have to give it up for the most part, for at least not keeping it in my house, and try not to keep a lot of it in my house or anything like that. But I don't fully abstain from it. So that's kind of a plan for some of the blackberries, and definitely making like the blackberry jam and all that stuff. So yeah, that's one of the things that I got going down there. And then I also planted a bunch of fruit trees, but I was not down there to take care of the fruit trees as much as I should have. I'd say I probably had about 60% live that I planted. I planted about 32 fruit trees and like 3 or 4 pecan trees. And I would say probably about 60% of them are alive right now, which is pretty good. So I'm happy about that, and I need to protect them a little bit better. I did notice that there were a lot of ticks down there, so there's probably a lot of deer coming in and out and through, and that's also good news because I'm a hunter, so be able to get some wild game during the seasons, and hopefully all that works out. And there's a hunting club down there that they're currently landlocked, so They gave me a call and wanted to know if they could get maybe some access through my property. So we'll probably talk to them about, providing them some kind of, divide up the land and create some kind of easement property if they are interested in something like that, which sounds like they are. And they even asked me if I wanted to buy the 40 acres that sits behind me on that land. And I would definitely love to have that 40 acres in the future. But I don't know if I can afford it right now. But I think if the idea for the Airbnb and the passive income there and building the permaculture farm and everything with my workshops and everything works out in the future, that I would I would love to expand it and can kind of create like an intentional community in that area with people being able to come and building even more structures into the forest and everything like that. So one of the big visions I kind of had was kind of making it like a World of Warcraft in real life, or just like a fantasy realm in real life. So and the property is all kinds of, it could definitely be transformed into something like that. And I would be kind of like the blacksmith guy that you would go to on your quest and pick up your wares and things like that to go on your journey through the forest and stuff like that. So so that's kind of the vision I've had for the property, and I talk about it in one of my older posts. You can look up vision for my property on my blog, and you can see kind of where I want to go with it. So yeah, if everything works out successfully, then that's definitely something I'm going to do. And I did post this first episode while I'm waiting on Professor Bromide. I don't know if you're there, Professor Bromide, but you're free to unmute yourself whenever you're available. But we'll see if I can play this video or not. I didn't get my proper backups to my IPFS pinning and all that stuff, so I don't know how reliably this will play for you, but we will see if it'll play. And it's a recent video, so let's see if it'll play for us here. Maybe not. But that video has got, here we go.
Hey everybody.
We'll just let this video play.
Just made it to my property and the first travels with the travel trailer, and everything went pretty smooth.
Oops.
I have all my stuff in here.
Yeah, so one thing about...
It's not organized that well right now. Some of the stuff's just going to be sitting down here on the property for a little while. But it all made it. I need to tie some things down better. I need to get some things more organized in here. But everything made it fine. I did get a lot of looks on the way down here. Some people that are definitely curious about what I'm doing and everything. So I gave them the name for my my YouTube channel, the Tinker Tribe, and my Steemit, making stuff if they wanted to follow me. So this is my land.
All right, this is giving me some troubles when I see that Professor Bromide is here. So y'all are free to go check that out later. Go check it out if you want, and watch the video. But hey, man, how's it going? Can you hear me? Is everything good on your end?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome, brother.
It's good to be on.
Yeah, thank you for joining me this morning. It's been a long time since I got to chat with you and try to catch up with what you have going on. And gave you an introduction a little earlier, and about how you're just kind of the jack of all trades and get your hands in a little bit of everything. And so So yeah, one of the things that I am really wanted to catch up with. What? I guess I lost him. Yeah. Oh dang it, man! We lost you for a second.
Maybe I when I uploaded that picture, it might have choked our tiny little connection. It's like breathing
Ah.
through a straw.
Oh
We have
no.
to do our internet through uh, it's through like a cell phone. What do they call it? A MiFi cell phone connection.
Oh,
And
okay.
so the bandwidth is pretty limited. So my daughter has been told that she can't watch YouTube videos this afternoon, which is normally what she likes to be doing on a Saturday.
Oh no. Okay, so you guys are out in the country somewhere, I guess, huh? So you guys are running
Yeah,
off a tether instead of a land connection or something.
right, right. So we use I
Okay.
guess it's a Verizon Air card. So it's really just like a cell phone that you put on so that it has a wireless. It broadcasts a wireless signal,
Yeah.
but it's the same technology as using your phone to make a wireless hotspot, except that it's a one trick pony. It'll connect up the wireless network and then provide Wi-Fi. But it works fine, but it's not a lot of bandwidth, and
Okay.
we're probably going to be the last people on the planet to get anything faster because there just aren't a lot of people out here in the country. We live out in the middle of nowhere.
Ah, okay, yeah. I was wondering how well that's working for you because I'm gonna have to do something similar on my property. Um, I'm looking at um, I'm looking at doing one of these plans where it's like, I guess it's totally unlimited. I know there's different plans for your phone where you can do. They say it's unlimited, but it's only up to a certain amount. But then they cut off your data, I guess. And then there's some that are different where it is unlimited, but yeah, I guess you're capped at a certain bandwidth. I guess is how it works.
Ours works like it's unlimited, and the cost is fixed per month, but
Okay.
we only get first priority on the bandwidth until we hit some sort of cap.
Date data
And
limit.
yeah, you're right. So as soon as we use up a certain amount of data for the month, then our requests for more data or more bandwidth kind of go to the bottom of the heap. And so,
Uh,
you know, during the end of the month when we're over that cap, you can really tell when everybody wants to use the bandwidth because everything slows way down. So, but we can still stream stuff over Netflix most of the time.
yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of I have a hard time predicting when it's going to be unusable and when it's going to be just fine. But
Eh.
I don't know
Eh.
who else is on it. But if the neighbors want to watch something, something's got to give, and so whoever's willing to pay the most gets to use the bandwidth.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I've got a few friends that are out in the county, and they came up with something pretty pretty unique, I guess. So they're doing like a line of sight tower. I guess it's like a microwave thing or something, and they set up this really tall tower, and then my buddy's dad has fiber internet on his side, and they're able to broadcast his bandwidth to them line of sight with another tower, and they pick it up and use that internet instead of doing this cell phone thing. So there are options like that, like building networks, but just like you're saying, it's all about cost. It's what you want to pay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, brother. So, yeah, you've had a lot of stuff. I've been wanting to catch up with you for a while, but the most recent thing I see you got going on is that it's bee season. So, one of the big things that you do is you catch wild swarms, right?
Yeah, it's beekeeping is fun, but once you get past the stings, like you know, a lot of people, you get a few stings and then your immune system just stops overreacting, and it's really like getting a pinch, or a mosquito bite or something, and you don't really, it's not something that's distracting anymore. And so other people have the opposite, where they have this immune response that just keeps getting more and more vigorous, and they start to go closer and closer to anaphylactic shock every time they get stung. And so they really got to be careful, or quit doing bees at all. But for me, like, I get a couple of stings at the beginning of the season. I think, dang, that hurt. I don't remember it hurting that much. And then by the end of the season, it's no big deal. And so this year, actually, I got stung a few times this morning, and where it hit me, if it's a fleshy spot, it swells up, but it's not painful. It's just kind of warm and tight, and swollen. But it's not so bad. Now, if you get stung on your lips, that's a whole different thing, because that's bad. Cause your lips swell up really big, and you start to kind of look funny. But and I have a beard, so like when the bees get into hair, it really makes them angry. So like if you let a bee get into your beard, you're gonna go to work looking like you were in a bar fight.
Oh man, I can only imagine. That would be a trip, man. especially
Although I got nailed on the very tip of my nose one time, and that was no problem. Like I thought, oh wow, everyone's gonna make fun of me. I'm gonna look like you're
gonna look like Ron.
I'm gonna look exactly. I'm gonna look like a clown, like giant honking red nose. But it actually didn't swell at all, and it didn't hurt the next day. But it was dead on the very tip of my nose.
Oh man.
Yeah, I don't know how. I don't know. Sometimes they do swell up, and sometimes they don't. It's hard to say.
Dang, the struggle is real with beekeeping.
Yeah, but the coolest part about beekeeping is not the honey. It's for me, it's the catching the swarms, because it's like it's exciting, like trapping or hunting or fishing or something like that, where you're out there like setting your traps and trying to make your plan about how you're gonna catch them. And then if you set out traps and you catch a few, that's fun. But sometimes you can find a swarm that's kind of like out in the wild hunting around for a place to live. And and if you can shake them into a box, then you might be able to convince them to take up residence. But you're not really like holding them against their will or anything. You can't make bees do anything they don't want to do. So so you're really just sort of trying to give them a good place to live.
Give them a better home than the one that they had already found.
So like a swarm like that in that picture from that my wife actually took that with their cell phone, and she said that she felt really guilty that she was too chicken to go over and catch it, because you can see how close to the ground that one is. It was about 4 feet off the ground or 3 feet off the ground. That one was that's a chip shot. It's easy to catch that one. You just take a box that's got some comb in it. And ideally it's like really old comb that's kind of dark and smells like bees. And the bees like to start up their new home in a spot that already had bees in it, because it kind of means that somebody else thought it was a good idea to live here. So it's probably a reason that gives them a head start. So they if you give them a box that's about 40 liters, which is the size of a standard beehive, and they like that, and they like to have their swarm would like to settle in a spot that's got a kind of smallish opening to it, so one that's easily defendable, and where they don't have to like worry about a bear crawling in or sticking his paw in, so or another bee swarm trying to rob them out. So bees will rob each other. So if they try to choose a defensible location, and so a hole that's like 1.25 inches in diameter is big enough so that they can all get in there and they can ventilate the space correctly, but they can also defend the opening if they're attacked, and bears can't get in. And then they prefer a spot that's up off the ground too, but they'll nest in like the very bottom of a hollow tree, or like under a shed or something. So they'll go with what they can get if they can't find one that's at 15 feet off the ground, which is kind of what they really like. And you just shake them in there, and once enough of the bees think it's a good spot to live, then they sort of start fanning. They like lift up their butts in the air and they pump their wings and they release a pheromone that I don't think people can smell, but a lot of the pheromones that bees make humans can smell too. But they release this pheromone that is like the homing beacon, and so the other bees follow that smell back to wherever the good spot is. And once you see them doing that, you probably have got them. Like they're probably gonna take up residence and move in, and then you just got to give them some time. And so like a good heavy swarm like that one right there in that picture is probably about 4 pounds of bees.
Yeah.
And it'll take them maybe 20 minutes and they'll all move in. They just march straight in through the door. It's pretty cool. They kind of flow in.
Wow.
And
very cool.
Unfortunately, that swarm was in that little tree right behind my apiary near my workshop.
Okay.
But I was out of town. I was down in Clemson. So I was on business, and my wife sent it. So she really wanted to catch the bees for me, but she chickened out. So if she had just like stuck the box underneath them and like bumped that tree, it would have been a done deal. She would have had one in the bag. But, yeah. But I was working in my shop today on another project, and I'll try to post a picture of the other project that I'm working on, but it'll probably kick me off. But I was working on a project like modifying a metal lathe so that I can use it as a milling machine.
Yeah.
And and I was thinking I gotta go, and I was fooling around with my cutting torch. I don't know if you've ever messed around with a oxyacetylene cutting torch.
No, I haven't messed around with that yet.
You gotta, if you ever have a chance to get one, if you've got an oxyacetylene cutting torch and a welder and a junkyard, you can make anything.
You can just make anything, yeah.
Yeah, they call it the gas axe because you can just like chop through metal, and it's amazing how big a piece of metal you can cut with the gas axe because you're really like heating up the metal with the torch. But then the thing that makes it work is like a button or a lever that makes a jet of pure oxygen. And when you jet pure oxygen on hot steel, it burns. And so then the burning steel actually provides its own heat to keep itself hot. And then you really just like it's no force at all. You're just like pushing this jet of oxygen straight through the metal. And like, even with a handheld little torch, you can cut through 4 or 5 inches of steel that way, 4 or 5 inches deep.
That is cool.
It's really cool. So, but I was cutting up pieces of metal that I'm using to make this this modification for the lathe, and I was kind of getting ready to come inside, a little bit before 1 Eastern here to get on the radio with you.
Yeah.
And I walked right past a bush at the edge of my driveway, and there's the swarm. Like they've been hanging out all this time through really nasty weather. Like it was pouring rain, and you could tell they were cold because it's a little bit cool today. Maybe it's like 62 or 65 or something. It's a nice day to be out, but if you were sitting still with a t-shirt on, you'd get cool. But but we had some really heavy weather.
Yeah, and we just had that come through our place too.
Yeah. So let me see if I can put that. Oh yeah, there's the gas axe. Patient Zero put up a picture of it.
Yeah, Patient Zero is always on top of it with the looking up stuff on the show. It's awesome.
All right. Yeah. So I walked right past it, and there it was. Just hanging in the tree.
So that was the swarm that your wife didn't catch. So that you have some ability to have redemption there.
Yeah. So I don't know how many of them made it that whole time, but they seemed like they were. It's a viable swarm.
Oh yeah, he got kicked again. Yeah, this is fascinating. So Yeah, he was talking about the other bees will try to take over and try to kick him out of the swarm. So that's going to be my next question: is how many of these swarms can he kind of keep on a piece of property? And will they try to fight each other? That's something I want to know. But the big thing is, yeah, I don't know about what type of bees they are, and I guess, yeah, man, you really have to have some cojones to go out there and just start stirring up these swarms and catch them in these boxes. But yeah, it's like the big thing that Professor Bromide talked to us earlier when he came on a while back with the swarms of bees, catching the swarms of bees. They are hardier in your local climate, and they tend to survive. Whereas if you have bees shipped in from other areas, then they can catch diseases and other things, and they have a lot of die off. But if you can catch these swarms, then you have a hardier bee population. So yeah. So Patient Zero says you got to watch out for the Africanized ones, and they will sting and sting and sting. You know, there were all these talks about Africanized bees several years ago, but it doesn't seem like there have been. It seems like that may have been for nothing. I don't know. That's something that maybe, Professor Bromide would really know a little bit more about. Yeah, okay. So Patient Zero just put up Invasive Species video. I'll have to check that out by Black Pill. I like that guy. Yes, yeah, the Africanized bees are, I guess, pretty aggressive, and they will keep stinging you until it's all done with. Okay, yeah. So Rondon's saying that they are a problem, but it's sensationalized. So yeah, I don't know if you really get caught up in a swarm of Africanized bees, like how much or how hard it is to deal with them. And, can you get away in a decent amount of time? Do you have to stay around a certain area for a certain amount of time and they just totally attack you? Yeah, that's those are some questions, but yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting with the bee population, and a lot of them they seem to be very finicky when it comes to catching diseases and dying off and things. And I think a lot of it may have to deal with glyphosate. And this is my speculation, but I think it may have to do with our industrial farming practices, and glyphosate is part of the problem with the bee population dying off, at least weakening their immune systems and making them more susceptible to things like mites and things that you see with some bee populations and having an issue. So yeah, Patient Zero says that somebody had a problem with in their house. I did actually have a friend of mine that had a giant bee. He had a giant bee colony take over in his attic in his house, and it was a giant thing to remove them from his house, and he had to do it all himself. He had to do all that stuff himself to get the bees out of his house. So yeah, they can be an issue. See, yeah, it's only a problem when it's a problem. Yeah, and they could possibly be deadly. And then Peachy's got a picture of somebody petting a bee. It looks like, while it's not stinging them or something. That's crazy. And then we got Professor Bromide holding all the bees in his hand. That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. You got to be like super in communion with these bees. It seems like, because it seems like anybody else getting close to the swarms and they just kind of come and attack you and try to sting you. So But I've seen people. Yeah, so some bees like to be patted. How about that? Isn't that neat? That's so cool. They become your pets, I guess, at that point. So that's pretty neat. Very cool. So let's see if we can bring Professor Bromide back on. Those are some cool pictures, man. You having the cojones to just go grab some bees, huh? And so I guess Peachy Mod was saying like there are bees that like to be pet and stuff. So do they like kind of you have become like grow this special relationship with them, or they still...
I don't think they really identify me as an individual, but
Yeah.
they like the smell of the queen pheromone. Smells like a little bit like lemongrass, and so I have some lemongrass oil that I got from like the local health food store, and so when they're you got to it's easy to overdo it because it's really concentrated. But before I stuck that box underneath them and shook them into the box, I took the tiniest little dab of lemongrass oil on my finger and kind of rubbed it right near the entrance. And so you could definitely tell that they were interested in me and how my hand smelled, and they wanted to crawl all over it was actually my left hand was the one that I was putting up there for the bees to crawl on, because my right hand is the one where I got stung a few times, and when they sting, they release a pheromone that smells like bananas. And
okay.
And so that's also the signal to like attack here. So I didn't want to stick that near them and encourage them to get more excited. So I was kind of using my left hand that was clean and just kind of scooping the bees and pushing them around and really gently. But they don't mind like if you put a little pressure on them. Like I could have easily just like rolled my hand over and sort of pressed on them a little bit, and they'll just like wiggle loose. And so they kind of make this like if you get one so that you're about to squash it, they make this like kind of buzzing. They like really vibrate hard underneath your fingers. Yeah. And if you kind of feel that and back off just a little bit, they won't sting. They'll just sort of wriggle out from underneath you. And it's a cool experience to be able to touch them and everything. And and I was kind of like taking a handful of bees and then move around and hold them right near the entrance, and you could watch them kind of like orient toward the entrance where their sisters are in there fanning and signaling, come here, and they would walk right in. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
That is really cool. So is that a universal scent? Lemongrass, would all bee hives, would they all kind of have an affinity towards that lemongrass scent?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it'd be certainly all. These are Apis mellifera, and so that's the common honeybee, and so that's the European honeybee. Okay. And so definitely all the European honeybees use that, and the Africanized bees are really close. That they're Scutellaria, and I think they use the same thing and a lot of it. So apparently people who live in an area where they've got the Africanized bees, when they get into a hive and they can smell bananas, they know they're about to get lit up, because the Africanized bees they'll attack in such force that you can't even see. Like your veil gets covered with bees. Whoa. And you can't see. And they don't quit, and they'll chase they'll chase anybody away. Yeah, for 100 yards. So my bees, like if you're standing right in front of their hive and they're grumpy because the weather's bad or something's going wrong, they'll keep at you as you're walking away for maybe 20 feet. It's not far, and then they give up and they go home. Yeah. But the Africanized bees, they'll chase you 100 yards back to your truck, and when you slam the door, they'll be covering the windows, and they won't quit. And I've heard people like jump into a swimming pool, and then they have the problem where they can't come up for air, because as soon as they come up for air, their mouth gets filled with bees because they're just all over. It sounds horrible. Yeah, you got to be careful.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. It was like how severe is it getting into the Africanized bees, and And so, yeah, you just covered it there, is that they're relentless. So, do they pop up? Have you ever come across a swarm of those, or like in your area at all?
No, no, we don't have a problem with it, but it's weird, but like the thing you hear about in beekeeping is the mites. These mites came in that were native to somewhere in Southeast Asia, and like I guess all of like South Asia all the way up into Russia, and those those bees have kind of like come to some sort of equilibrium or something. They've adapted to having these mites around, but the bees in Europe and the United States, they when the mites were introduced, they spread really wild. It's kind of like a tick that gets on the bees,
Okay.
except that in proportion the mites on the bee it's like having a tick on you that's the size of a cat. It's
Whoa.
big. So they do a lot of damage, and the bees can usually tolerate the mites on them, sucking the hemolymph. It's like bee blood, but they can't take the viruses that are transmitted by that. So it's like Lyme disease for the bees, and they have a bunch of viruses that they get, and that wiped out a whole bunch of wild colonies, and it made it a lot harder for the Africanized genes to migrate around, because the Africanized bees they look the same, and they can interbreed with the European honeybee, but their behavior is a little different, and they tend to make smaller colonies that don't overwinter well in cold places. So, and they tend to swarm a lot, like multiple times in a season, and they'll often abandon a hive entirely. Like the queen can slim down to flying condition and stop laying eggs very quickly, and then she can pick up with her colony, and they'll not just swarm, which is like a reproductive process, but they'll abandon their home and move to another one, and they'll kind of hop around. And so the Africanized bees are much better adapted to warm weather, closer to the equator, where they don't have to keep a big colony that accumulates a lot of resources to overwinter. And so we're far enough north here so that we just don't have that as a problem.
Okay.
But if you're in Texas or in
probably where I am in Alabama or something.
Yeah, I'll bet they could. But your winters are pretty cold, right?
Yeah, we do get pretty cold winters still. Yeah.
Yeah. Places like California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, there you got to be really careful, because if you're in one of the areas that has Africanized bees, every time you go into a new colony, you got to suit up, and I guess people who know that kind of stuff can tell right away whether they're into the Africanized bees. But you can use those resources though. So people still try to catch wild swarms there. They just catch a wild swarm, and if there's any hint of meanness, like aggressiveness, they just pinch off the queen. They'll just find the queen and take her out, and then introduce a new queen. It's not all that easy though, because they don't accept queens like normal bees do, and they'll ball up on her and they'll smother and kill her. But there are ways that you can essentially force them to make a queen for themselves out of eggs that are only from friendly bees. So you can essentially like kill the queen off and then come back and ruin all the queen cells that they try to make, and then they're queenless and they haven't got any eggs to make a new queen, and then they'll accept a frame of eggs that are from friendly bees, and they'll raise a queen out of the friendly bee eggs, and they'll accept that queen, and in a few weeks they've kind of changed their tune. They start to get more mellow. That's a pretty common way to handle it, but it's fun. It's really neat.
Yeah, man, I am looking to give it a shot myself. So what are the conditions that you lay for trying to trap the bees? Like, what are they looking for? How are you setting some scents out that make it more attractive for them to come, or what's the optimal way to increase your likelihood of catching a swarm?
So patient zero asked the question about what makes a queen, and about royal jelly, and that's true. So when the baby bees are just hatched out of their eggs, everybody gets royal jelly. That's like their first food, and then if they keep feeding royal jelly continuously, the larva develops really fast, then it becomes a queen. And if they quit feeding royal jelly, then they feed another less nutritious form of food that bee will develop a little bit more slowly and will become a female worker. So they have the ability to create a queen out of any egg, as long as or actually any newly born larva, as long as it's very, very young and it's still being fed royal jelly, then they can make a queen out of it.
That is so cool.
It is pretty cool. And they're all females. So all the workers are females, and of course the queen is a female. And then they're drones. But the weird thing about bees is that the drones are hatched out of unfertilized eggs.
Huh.
So, which is weird. Like the drones have no father. They have a mother, but no father.
So weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And because the workers are females, but they've never mated, and they don't normally lay any eggs, but they have eggs. They're just not fertilized. So the workers can lay drone eggs, and occasionally that happens. Like if the colony goes without a queen for a long time, and they're going to die out. They've got no hope. Their only method of passing on their genes to any other bees is to make drones that have their own genetics. And then those drones will go out and try to mate with other queens, and that's how they pass on their genes. It's the weirdest thing. Like they're hopeless. It's the colony is going to die, but they do everything they do everything they can to raise drones to go out and spread their genes, which is I think it's fascinating. Like everything about bees is awesome. But, so the question about like how do you make a swarm? They call it a swarm trap, but it's not really a trap. It's really just like a birdhouse, except it's a bee house. So it's supposed to be like a place that's inviting and attractive to bees.
Yeah.
Especially to a swarm of bees, because like a swarm of bees is a homeless colony. They're like hunting around trying to find a place to live.
Okay.
And so there was a guy who wrote a book that based on his research back in the 70s. That's Tom Seeley, and his research was all on what is it the bees are looking for in a new home when they're homeless, swarm, and what are they attracted to, and how do they find it? That was another thing he was trying to figure out. Like, how on earth do the bees collectively make a decision about where to go? Because you saw that picture of those two clusters of bees, like the one that was on Wednesday and then the one that was on today. They're just hanging on there, trying to keep each other warm.
Yeah.
Because their body temperature is only maintained by their metabolism, and so if the temperatures outside is below 95, they're having to burn resources. They're essentially burning honey, trying to keep warm. And so they're this cluster of bees is the clock is ticking on them, because they don't really have they don't have a way to make honey. They've only got the energy, and they're stored in the fat in their abdomens to keep themselves warm and keep going. And so they kind of hold together as a ball like that. And the bees that are scouts, they're like the older bees that are on the outside of the cluster. They fly out and they kind of look for likely places. So it'd be like a hole in a tree, or like a broken down barn where they can get into like a wall cavity or something. And what they're really looking for is a hollow opening. Instinctively, they're going for something like a hollow tree with a hole in it. And in my yard, I've got one that's hollow, and the opening is usually like a slit, because the tree is trying to grow closed around there. And they want they're attracted to a volume of about 40 liters. They're attracted to something that's got an opening that's nearer to the bottom than the top, and
Okay.
And relatively small, like an inch and a quarter diameter hole.
Okay.
And they like it dark inside, and they like it nice and kind of airtight. Like they don't like a draft going through. And if it's got a couple of little holes, like it's a little leaky, then it's like a fixer-upper home, and they'll fix it up. They'll like plug up all the holes with propolis. That's like sap and stuff that they scrape off of leaves, and who knows where all they get it, but they gather like this gum that comes from trees, and they pack all the openings filled with propolis, and they'll kind of cover over any unsanitary surfaces with propolis and make it sanitary.
Huh.
And then they'll start building there, but they like a spot that's up off the ground, and they like the scent of lemongrass is a good one, just because they naturally produce a kind of, the queen naturally produces a pheromone that's supposed to smell a little bit like lemongrass. But
Okay.
one theory is that they part of the way that they communicate to the other bees on how to find a hive is that they kind of carry the scent of the opening that they've been exploring back to the cluster, and then the bees who are recruited to try to find that on their own as well, like to head out and provide a second opinion on the potential new home. They are going to follow the directions on which way to fly and how far that they get from their sister, the scout who found the place originally. But they also kind of sniff the scent that adheres to her. They have extremely sensitive chemical receptors, so that after they touch something, then they carry enough of that scent with them so that their sisters can smell their feet and then find that same scent later on. But it's boggling how it could possibly work. But the lemongrass smell on that bee who's coming back and signaling to her sisters where to go is one of the things that helps the bees to find that new home. And once enough bees have explored it and provided their opinion that it's a good spot to live, then collectively the entire cluster would just like pick up and fly all together, and they and with the queen. And as soon as they do that, then they've kind of committed to that particular hole, and they'll all climb in there and make it their home.
Okay.
They'll take up residence.
Wow, very cool. So yeah, if you just create the good initial conditions for them and maybe provide some of that lemongrass scent, then you can probably increase your likelihood that they might find that home. And it sounds like you can make some mistakes. You don't have to be perfect on making your little shelter for them.
Oh no, not at all. So you can easily just like use a cardboard box and kind of tape it closed and poke a hole in it, and it's a reasonably good choice.
Wow.
And it helps a lot if you can if you can give them something that smells like bees already. So if you have a way to get a piece of comb, then that's ideal. If you have a way to get some propolis, that's good too, because the propolis is this gum that has this really strong smell of beehive. It's one of the things that makes a beehive smell fantastic when you open it up. There's the wax, and that has its own smell, and then there's the propolis, which has sort of a resinous, kind of piney aroma. It kind of depends on what they've harvested it from, but it smells really, really good. And then the bees have their own smell too, but like a kind of an animal smell, like have you ever picked up a puppy and like just stuck your nose into its fur? They have a smell that smells like clean animal, and so the bees have that kind of their own like unique animal smell. But if you can provide a house for them that smells like bees have already been there, especially with the old wax and some propolis, then that helps to convince them that they're in a good spot. And it really needs to be like a spot that doesn't have a draft, that doesn't have. You'd want the opening to only be on one side, because you put an opening on
Okay.
two sides, and the kind of breeze kind of blows through,
Yeah.
and so it's got to be dark. So any box that looks like that is going to be attractive to the bees. And then after that, every other feature of the swarm trap is really just a matter of making it convenient for the beekeeper, because you want to give the bees a place to make combs that are orderly and easily handleable. Because at some point you got to move the colony out of the box and into a beehive so that you can handle it. But most of the hardware for beekeeping is not for the benefit of the bees. It's to make the beekeeper's job easier. The bees are perfectly happy to live inside the wall of an old broken down house.
Okay. Yeah. So you're talking about, creating the frames for for them to build their honeycomb and all that, and making it, rectangular so you can easily process it and everything like that.
Yeah. And to make it so that the frame has like ears on the ends, so that you can sort of balance it on the edges of a box. And the width of the frames is designed so that the bees will build only one comb on each frame, and that they generally won't cross over the combs and attach two frames together, because they have like the size of the beehive, the size of the cells in the honeycomb are sized so that the baby bees will fit inside it when they're hatching out. And so if you make it so that it's got the right width, then they won't try to build two combs on the same frame, because there wouldn't be enough room for the baby bees, because the cells would be too small. And so if you make too much space, then sometimes the bees will you put honey in there, and they'll put them in extra deep cells. But other times they'll decide that they're going to try to build two combs in the space. And so as soon as they start doing that, then it gets all messed up. And a lot of them, if you went out now and went digging through my hives, I'm sure you'd be able to find a whole bunch of them that are messed up. Like the piece of comb might have fallen off, and then they'll just keep using it, and they'll attach it to whatever it's touching, and it gets all snarled in there. But what I found is that some of my best producing hives are the ones that are going so fast, and they're producing comb so fast and everything so fast, that when something goes wrong and the comb falls down, and they just they'll just like plow right over it, and they'll start making comb crosswise and all over. The inside of the hive is really messy, but those are often the productive hives. They're the ones that are gonna produce a lot of honey. So I try not to mess around with it too much. I try to make it if I have an opportunity to straighten things back out again, I will. But I'm not going to do like major surgery on the hive and start cutting open big parts of, especially the brood. Because I feel terrible when you cut open a comb and there's like baby bees falling out, and they're all going to die. So I try not to touch that at all. So if they get messy and I can't help them by fixing it, I'm not going to just mess up their work to help myself. Sometimes you got to, but you can't harvest without ruining their comb. So that's a
decision you got to really think about.
Yeah. So I mean, when you go to harvest, if you've got an extractor, you're kind of minimizing the amount of work they got to do. Because you slice the tops of the cells off and you spin the honey out with centrifugal force, and then you can give them the comb back again, and they just refill it. And so it saves them a lot of work if you can reuse the comb over again. But I don't have an extractor. The local bee club has one that I could use if I harvested enough all at once that I really wanted to. But I cut the comb out and I just press the whole thing, and so you get a lot more pollen that comes out in your honey that way, and the pollen adds flavor, and it also is the thing that makes it so that if you're eating a local honey in the wintertime, it'll help make your allergies not so bad in the spring. Right now, I'll bet there are a lot of people around where you are who just can't go outside or have to go around dosed up with because we're in pollen season right now, so every surface in our house is covered with yellow pollen, and people who really suffer from their allergies are suffering bad right now. And so a lot of my customers are buying honey and they're saving it so that they can be eating a little bit every day, really from like the from
The
the winter
start of the
solstice.
season to
Yeah,
when the pollen is
until
not so bad.
yeah, right, right.
Yeah,
And so
speaking of that, how's everything going with you on the Homesteaders Co-op? Are you got some good sales coming from that, or how is that going?
uh, I only sold I guess I sold 3 jars uh, through Homesteaders Co-op before I ran out of honey for the season.
Oh wow,
So,
okay.
yeah, because the easiest way to sell honey is on Facebook. Because if you,
Oh,
like all
okay.
your local friends are looking for local honey,
Yeah,
and anybody who enjoys local honey is going to jump at the chance to buy honey from somebody they know where they can get it,
yeah,
um, and they know that it was harvested locally. Because if you are eating honey that's from like California or somewhere else that might be grown in an area that doesn't really have the same types of plants, then if
yeah,
there's any benefit at all to consuming honey to reduce your immune response from the pollen, then you kind of lose that if you're buying honey from overseas or from far away. So we sell a lot of honey that way. Just my wife will just say,
yeah.
there's only 10 jars left. Who's going to take them? And they're all gone.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, that
um,
seems like the Homesteaders like several products in one, because you can do all kinds of stuff, even with the beeswax and all kinds of stuff, right?
yeah, I was trying to talk my daughter into making a batch of lip balm because you can buy like a kit that'll have the like a chapstick kind of container that where you twist it and it presses up the lip balm.
Yeah.
And you could all in the beekeeper supply catalogs, you can get all the hardware that you need to kind of make a product like that. Because the truth is that a lip balm is really just like melted beeswax with some other ingredients like coconut oil and a little scent in it.
Okay.
And maybe menthol or something to if you want that kind of tingling sensation. But it's really just like beeswax and an oil and then an essential and then a scent, like an essential oil. So I was
Okay.
trying to talk her into doing that. I thought it'd be a good idea, but I haven't succeeded in convincing her to do that yet.
Yeah. She's got to get to it on her own. Maybe if she can make
Yeah.
some decent money with it, she might be more interested in it.
Well,
Good.
she was looking for something, but
Yeah.
sometimes I have a hard time convincing her that my ideas are good ideas.
Oh yeah. Well, if they're coming from your folks, the most kids probably don't want to do
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I've been looking into that myself, and I think trying to come up with different ways of making some extra passive income on the permaculture homestead, and yeah, I think local honey is a good way to go, and doing the different products
Yeah,
based on the honey as well, like mead and other things and stuff. So
yeah. Well, it's the last thing from passive income. I mean, it's not even close to
well,
passive.
right,
It's very
yeah,
active. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
right. But just definitely an income stream for sure. But
Yeah.
so what is considered local? Like how big of an area would it be considered local? Like 25
Yeah.
miles, 30 miles, something like that?
It's mostly based on I would say the most important thing is it's got to come from a similar biome. So if
Yeah.
you live in the mid-Atlantic, like my house is probably dead in the center of what you'd consider the mid-Atlantic region, then the the pollen that you're going to see in the spring is from the same kinds of plants. It's only a question of the timing. And so any place that's in the mid-Atlantic, I think would have something that's local enough so that you would have the same kind of pollen distribution. But there's also benefit to trying honey that's from a variety of different plants. And so some places they get a really big flow from particular plants, and it makes a varietal honey that's kind of like a varietal wine, where wine that's made from a particular grape is very different than wine made from different kinds of grapes. So, Sauvignon Blanc or Merlot or whatever. So the so some species of plants grow in a great enough abundance and produce enough nectar so that if you live in an area where you get a heavy flow from a particular plant, you can harvest honey that's from that plant and has only the character of that plant. So like some places, autumn olive grows so thick, like in West Virginia, there's autumn olive so thick that you can get almost pure autumn olive honey. Or
very cool.
Yeah, another one is a locust, black locust, that produces an extremely it's almost like water white, transparent honey that's got its own character. And so sourwood honey is one that's really popular, and if you don't live in a place where there's a lot of sourwood, you're never going to find it, because it's kind of, it's one of those products that's in such huge demand that all of it gets sold off before they can start sending it around.
Oh wow, that's something I didn't know. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So if you went to a local bee club and you kind of asked around, they'll tell you what the honey crop is in that area. So here, the vast majority of our honey comes from tulip poplar, which makes a very pleasant, not very. It's got an amber color, and it's got a not a distinctive flavor, but it's got a rich honey flavor. Some honeys are extremely distinctive, where you would never mistake it for something else, like buckwheat. It makes a very dark brown honey that has sort of a medicinal taste to it, like maybe a little bit like horehound cough drops or root beer or something. It's got a little bit of a medicinal taste.
So it's kind of bitter, I guess.
Yeah, it could be a little bit bitter, and it's something that some people really like, other people can't stand it. And my sister said, unusually, my sister worked at the apiary at Penn State for a while, and they did a lot of tours of I guess it was like fourth grade or little kids, young kids, like third grade classes would come through, and they do a honey tasting. And of course, if you give kids a bunch of different kinds of honey to taste, they're all into it. And she said that unusually, it's like most kids hate the bitter medicinal taste of the buckwheat honey, except for autistic kids. And she said it was really unusual that, like, if there was one kid in the room who wanted to try the buckwheat honey twice, it was usually the autistic kid in the class who wanted it, which is weird. I'm not sure if it's like her own personal observation, but
maybe something that they're deficient in, or something that they're looking for. Maybe
I don't know. It has something to do with like the perception. They just perceive the flavor differently or something. I'm not sure what it means, but she had a little theory that it was related somehow, but I don't know. I'm not sure. But
gotcha.
Yeah, you can get honey from different kinds of plants if you live in an area where there's a strong enough flow. But most of the time, it's kind of all mixed together. But no matter what, the honey that comes from your local area is going to have a certain terroir, because there's a certain blend of plants that are producing nectar during each season, and that's kind of it's the basis of the flavor of the honey.
Okay.
So it's fun. Yeah. And so here we've got a pretty good, it's actually a very easy place to raise bees, because there's a mild enough winter so that you don't have trouble with the bees running out of food. Although I had one colony that starved this last winter, but it's a mild enough winter so that it's pretty easy to get the bees to pack up enough so they can survive. And then and then the spring has plenty of pollen and nectar early enough so that they get a good start on the season.
Okay.
And then we have a dry season that's usually the end of July and all of August, and so that usually shuts down the brood production, which is good because it prevents the varroa mites from gaining a foothold. That the varroa mites can only reproduce on brood, so on bee brood. So if the bees stop producing brood for a period when there's a drought, then it breaks the cycle for the mites, and so the mites will lose a couple of generations, and their populations start to drop off. And then we have a nice mild fall where they're sort of fall blooming plants that provide enough pollen and nectar so that the bees can stock up for the winter, and then you start the whole cycle again. Because during the winter they're essentially just like, they're not hibernating, but they're just clustered up trying to keep warm, and they eat honey and they shiver, and they wait for spring.
Okay, so you really don't have to try to manipulate the environment. Just let the seasons happen naturally, and that's the best way to keep a healthy population.
Oh yeah. So people often ask, like, what can I plant? What flowers can I plant to help the bees? And the truth is that you don't really need to plant anything. You just need to stop killing things. You know? So you need to like cut out the herbicide that you're spraying, and like try not to put too much asphalt down, and because there's nothing bees can do with asphalt. But and mowing. So like mowing is probably the worst thing that you could possibly do. So when you drive past when I drive past a place that's got 2 or 3 acres of grass out front,
yeah,
where they're just so you can see the signs for the business. There's nothing out there. The grass.
It's like a bee desert.
And it's horrible, and it takes so much effort to maintain that. And it has, like, if it's a soccer pitch or like a football, if you're going to play some sort of sport, even golf and all that, then okay, fine. Then, but I don't see any reason to just cut grass just so that it looks like grass. Like, if you want it to look like sheep have been there, put sheep there, and feed something. But
I am with you. I am with you on that, brother. It makes me kind of disgusted. Well, it's like lawns are like the most useless thing ever. It's just like,
yeah,
right. It might be green, but that's about all you're getting out of it is green lookingness.
I had a consultant. Go ahead.
Sorry, there was a question. Patient Zero says, "Tell us about the honey pea," and there's a picture of a bee looking like it's peeing or something.
The honey pea.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is there a picture? Well,
yeah, in the chat. I don't have no idea. But,
look at that. Yeah, that's they only produce one. They only produce one excrement. So I guess you could call it poo. You could call it pee, but that's what they're doing. Yeah, everyone's got to poop, right? So the bees will try to defecate outside if they can, but if they have to, they'll go inside their hive, and then they got to clean it out. So they normally defecate on liftoff. So like they like lift off from the opening of the hive, and they lighten their load, and then they take off on a run to go try to find some honey. So they actually thirst from nectar. So they generally won't forage from the plants that are directly in front of their hive, because that's essentially a bathroom. And
okay.
Yeah, and the people who notice that the most are people who attempt to raise bees in their backyard, and then the laundry ends up covered with bee poop, and you don't really notice it until it's all over your fresh white linens, and then it's kind of gross. But it's like yellowish stripes. Yeah, that's bee poop.
Wild. And then the honey is there, like them throwing up, right?
Exactly, it's bee vomit. Yeah, so they drink the nectar and they store it in nectar. They call it the honey stomach, but it's actually just nectar at that point. And they release enzymes into that will break down some of the sugars. So most of the sugars in nectar are sucrose. So that's like a fructose and a glucose that are attached together.
Yeah.
And so that's like the same as table sugar. And then they release an enzyme that will break that into one fructose and one glucose. And the benefit of doing that is that it makes it so that the sugar will not crystallize out. So if you just make a solution of table sugar, it'll crystallize pretty quickly again. And if you took the same amount of sugar and it's called inversion. They call it inverting the sugar, but it's really just like cracking it in two pieces, and it crystallizes much more slowly that way. So it just makes it easier for the bees to get it back out again, because as long as it's liquid, they can just slurp it back out. If it crystallizes in the comb, they have to kind of chew it out, which is okay. They can do that, but sometimes they'll if they've got crystallized honey in the hive, or if you feed them dry sugar, they can use it. They just will go out and get water, and then they'll just spit drops of water onto it, and then they'll lift the water back up again.
Wow.
So
they're fascinating, fascinating creatures, man.
It's amazing. It's really cool. And so they'll just chew out the dry crystallized honey from the comb. But normally the honey does not crystallize in the comb. If you press it out, or if you sling it out with a centrifuge and put it in a jar, it crystallizes much faster. So the comb honey in the hive almost never crystallizes. And the reason why is because the little cells are nice and smooth inside, so there's nothing to start
no sharp points or anything.
Right, the seed crystals, and then the hive is warm, so the hive temperature is warm enough so that it's unlikely to crystallize. So if you took the comb out and you kept it at 95 degrees, which is the temperature of the hive, it'd probably store like that for a couple of years before it crystallized. But if you take the same honey and put it in a jar, it'll definitely crystallize before the end of the winter.
Yeah, because didn't you tell me that's the test, is that if you get a pasteurized honey, then it will never crystallize, but the wild honey will?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's right. So if you have your choice of honey that's been sitting around at the grocery store for a few months and it looks perfectly transparent, and one that's like set up like a rock, the stuff that's set up like a rock is probably going to taste better and be better for you, because it hasn't been pasteurized, it hasn't been cooked yet. And so you can always take it home and just like warm it up a little bit in the microwave to make it easier to get out of the jar.
Yeah.
But if you heat it up to the point where it won't crystallize again, you've really evaporated the aromatic portion of the honey that gives it its flavor and aroma, and whatever enzymes were in there that are valuable digestive enzymes are starting to decompose at those temperatures. And and then the pollen is starting to cook. So the pollen is best consumed raw if you can. So there's always a little bit of pollen in the honey, and so if you are interested in getting some benefit from for your allergies, you got to have that honey raw.
Yeah. Okay. Man, it seems like so many things are better for you in the raw form, and as soon as you start to cook it, you lose a lot of the beneficial stuff in it.
Yeah.
From what I've researched.
Yeah. There's some things that are not like that, but honey is definitely one where it's better raw, but it's better for you raw. But like some things, like I think there are some grains where they're really pretty bad for you if you eat them raw, because there are anti-nutrients that actually absorb nutrients in them, and if you cook them, you can denature the anti-nutrients.
Yeah.
So there's some things you really need to cook.
Yeah, and another one is soy, I think, is we I guess in the US we eat like a lot of raw soy products, or we have a lot of raw soy products, but it's like harmful unless you ferment it. I think they do it in Asia. They ferment a lot of their soy stuff, and it's actually better if you ferment it or something than eating it raw soy products.
I can believe that. Yeah, I can believe that. There's one of my colleagues at work, his father's vegan and had to stop eating soy because he ate so much soy that he started to suffer from the it's like an endocrine disruptor. There's something in it that mimics estrogen, and he was getting such a
Right.
huge dose of this stuff that it made all the hair on his legs fall off.
No way.
And, not that's the end of the world. I mean, if I wasn't all furry everywhere, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It'd be good. But I just certainly don't want to. I don't want to get that way
No.
from eating something that's not good for me. So yeah. So I think if you're not vegan, then you are eating a variety of different things. I don't think you got to worry about it. At least I certainly don't have to worry about it. I show no signs of being like de-haired by eating too much soy.
I'm on the same spectrum, man. If
I
I
can
was
tell.
walking around in the woods, I would look like the missing link or something, man.
You're gonna get some sort of film of you, like, oh, we saw Bigfoot in Alabama.
Yeah. Who knows, man? Once I go fully, on the land, it's who knows what'll happen. But
At least you met the neighbors. So you see, we're talking about how you met your neighbors, and
yeah,
so they know that if there's this giant hairy thing walking around and outside, then they don't need to like call the National Enquirer or anything.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, so I guess you said one of the things was if you had some comb from another beekeeper. So, could I get some comb, like say from you in Alabama? Would that help here, or would I want to go get some from somebody locally that's doing it?
Yeah. So, mailing comb across state lines requires a license.
Really?
So yeah, because that's one of the
Wow.
ways that you can spread the bee diseases. And so
Wow.
your state apiarist needs to inspect your hives. The thing that they're really concerned about is
The bee die off.
foul brood. I think it's a bacteria called that causes foul brood, and it's really horrible for when it gets into the population, and it's spread very easily from hive to hive, and it stays alive in the comb for a long time. Like there's nothing you can do to the comb to process it to make it safe. If it had foul brood in it, it'll cause foul brood in all the bees that touch it. And so I've never seen any foul brood before, but your state apiarist would be very upset with me if we tried to mail comb.
Yeah. All right.
And so that's not a good idea. But your local bee club can set you up with somebody who's got some extra comb, because
Okay.
when you're inspecting a beehive, you often end up having to like cut out a little bit here or there, or if you're in the apiary at harvest time, they'll spin out a comb and one of them will blow out. Like it'll just like fall out of its frame. And so normally the
Okay.
beekeeper just chucks all that into a bucket and will melt it down and make wax, and just to get the wax for making candles and stuff.
Yeah.
But beekeepers are really nice people, and so they really want other people to take up it's not like a competitive business where there's not enough to go around. I don't think anybody's ever made enough honey so that they couldn't find people to buy it.
Yeah.
And so they're happy to talk bees with you, and they'd be happy to give you a couple of frames of comb. But the easiest way to get started in beekeeping is to find a beekeeper who is willing to
Can be your
sell you
mentor.
to get a mentor, someone that'll be willing to come look in your hives with you, and is willing to provide you with a locally sourced nuke. So a nuke is a miniature colony. Like usually it's 5 frames of a colony with a queen and some brood and everything ready to go. So a nuke, if it's available at this time of the season, is going to produce a really healthy colony by the end of the year. You won't get any honey the first year, but it'll be on its own. It'll be able to produce enough nectar and store enough pollen so that it can overwinter without any real assistance from you. So you just have to not mess up. You just have to give them a nice place to live and don't
Yeah.
mess them up. So
Okay.
yeah, so every other way to get started in bees carries the risk that they won't like the place you put them in, and they'll pick up and move, or they'll have trouble getting going on their own in the time allotted, and you might have to feed them or something. But
Okay.
the nuke is it's the closest thing to idiot proof you can get, and
Okay.
it's kind of hit or miss whether you can catch a swarm in your area. It's possible, but it's really helpful if you know where the wild colonies are to begin with. So, if you had a place where you found a tree that had bees living in it, then it's pretty likely that we could, figure out a way to make sure that when that colony issued its swarm in the next season, you'd be able to catch it. But it's much more likely that you'd get a good start by buying a nuke. And so a nuke colony that's 5 frames with a laying queen and some brood and some resources like honey and nectar usually runs about somewhere between 150 and 200, maybe 225. And the prices usually are highest early in the season, and they get cheaper as you go on. So in June and there, that's when you're going to get the cheap nukes if they're available. But a lot of beekeepers sell out, so that you got to order in advance. So the
Okay.
April nukes in my area, like on Craigslist, the April nukes are probably sold out by the 1st of January. Like everybody wants to get started early, and it's the best time. Like right now, it's prime time for bees, because that's why they're reproducing, because those swarms have the best survival rate now, which also means that any colony you started now is going to have the best survival rate that you can get.
Okay. Man, I took a bunch of notes here, and you gave me a really good education to get going here, and I'm gonna go for it, man. I'm gonna give it a try.
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we can definitely nerd out on some bee talk too. But that's one of many things that that you're involved with, that I'd like to talk to you about. We're running out a little bit out of time. We got about 20 minutes left, but one of the other things, if we could shift gears, if that's cool, is that I saw in one of your recent posts that you got involved with some conference about doing some nuclear stuff in space, and I was interested in talking to you about that a little bit, if you wanted to share a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so that was the NETS conference. It's a nuclear and emerging technologies for space. It was a conference that was held at Pacific Northwest National Lab, which is in Richland, Washington. So that's near where the old Hanford site was. That was one of the places where they were making the material for nuclear weapons during the Manhattan Project. And now the National Lab is sort of most closely associated with the technologies for the cleanup effort, but they also do other things too. They have a lot of energy related research that goes on there. So it's a national lab that's operated by the Department of Energy. And so
Okay.
the Nuclear and Emerging Technologies for Space conference is mostly about the technologies that are used to produce nuclear power in space.
Okay.
And now they're starting back up again on nuclear thermal propulsion. There are a couple of different ways that you can do propulsion that's powered with nuclear reaction, but nuclear thermal propulsion is the technology that's been demonstrated in the past, and they're interested in bringing it back again.
Okay. Because
yeah, so,
for a long time, right, there's a lot of politics about doing nuclear in space, right? So is that freeing up now, that the conversation's starting again?
I well, the last time that they launched a satellite with a significant amount of nuclear material in it, there was some stink about that. And there's a lot of people are just very anxious about anything nuclear. But the last time they launched a satellite or a probe that had a significant amount of nuclear material, it was a, a, it's a radiothermal generator. So it's not actually a nuclear reactor. It's really just a, uh, it's actually it's a big block of plutonium. But it's plutonium 238, which is an isotope that um, is not fissile in the sense that you can't put a whole bunch of it together and make a nuclear reactor that's self-sustaining, but it's an extremely high alpha activity. So it decomposes by producing an alpha particle, and the alpha particles are very heavy and they don't go very far. But so that means that every time one of them decays, all that energy is deposited right in the chunk of plutonium. And the result is that if you've got a piece of plutonium oxide where the plutonium is pure plutonium 238, it produces about 100 watts for every, I guess the RTG pellets are like, they must be about 50 grams.
So just from the decay, just from the alpha decay and producing heat, I guess, from the decay, and you capture that or something? Hello? Professor Bromide, you still there? Well, you must have been sharing some deep state information. We lost you on air. But yeah, that's fascinating to me. And looking at some of the nuclear technologies, and even stuff like thorium reactors, with the possibility that the thorium reactors could recycle some of the nuclear waste from spent nuclear fuel across other nuclear plants in the US and elsewhere. And it sounds like a more safe technology. Let's see, I'm not sure what happened to the professor. So he was a materials and surface chemistry guy, Rondon, but he can verify that. So he used to teach like materials classes and stuff when he was in the university realm, and that was actually very similar to my background was researching. I was doing a lot of materials research and chemistry and materials type research, mechanical, for like carbon fiber and composites and stuff. So we're kind of have similar backgrounds. But he ended up getting into the nuclear field, which is very interesting. So he works for a company that does nuclear stuff now, if I'm not mistaken. And this got me very interested, especially the talk about this article that he posted, which was making the trip to Mars. And so I hold a lot of I do get into the research on the space travel and a lot of that stuff. I do have a lot of questions like, why didn't we go back to the moon? And, what's up with the Van Allen belts? And I did ask him that question in this article, and he gave me a response, which was, it's designed in such a way that they don't dwell on the Van Allen belts for too long. But, yeah, are you back?
I'm back. Sorry,
okay.
I don't know. I guess my phone went to sleep or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that happens. Yeah, it'll drop you off. But dadgummit, man, we lost him again. I know. Yeah, Julia said they lost the technology. Yeah, sure they did. And I do question a lot of things because it makes so much sense to have something like a moon base that we could be building more space colonies and moving out into the broader solar system and starting to explore. And yeah, we lost you again. Are you back?
Yeah, I guess we'll try it one more time. If it
All
it
right.
dumps me again, then I'll just have to catch up with you later.
All right, yeah, it's getting close to the end of the show, but yeah, I just wanted to talk to Chad a little bit about that. The question I had was, you were saying that it was the decay of the plutonium that was creating the 100 watts of energy output. How are they capturing the energy? Is it through a thermoelectric generator or something like that?
Yeah, they use a thermoelectric generator, and then they also use the heat also to keep the circuits warm. So a lot of these probes that are out far enough, they get too cold because they're too far from the sun, and they quit working because of the cold. So they'll generate some heat with a thermoelectric generator, or they generate some electricity with a thermoelectric generator, and then they use the heat as well. So that I don't know if I got dropped off before I was saying that Voyager's been running 40 years now on the same
Plutonium.
Yeah, it's out leaving the solar system. And one of the cool things is that on that conference, the project manager who was responsible for the Voyager program was there, and he was going to the airport at the same time I was going, and so I got to give him a ride. And so on the way to the airport, my manager was sitting in the back seat, and he was peppering him with questions about Voyager, which is pretty cool because he's a legend, John Cassani. And so John Cassani was a project manager for Voyager, and then for the Viking, and for Mariner 1 and 2, and then he was the project manager for Prometheus, which was pretty cool, but it got canceled. It was supposed to be a really big nuclear powered probe that was going to go out to the Jupiter icy moons, and was going to be able to land a probe on one of the icy moons and then lift back off again and visit another one, which is pretty slick. You got to have a lot of power for that. So that one was that one had a real nuclear reactor. That wasn't just like these little thermogenerators are just like a little hot pellet. A real nuclear reactor is a whole different class.
Yeah. I actually have a buddy that he works in the propulsion simulation for NASA, and he said he had an opportunity when he was interning to work with a group that does their long conceptual missions, and they said if they were going to create a power source for like on the moon or something, they were studying how they could put a thermal nuclear generator on the moon and have it run like a high efficiency Stirling engine or something like that to create the power they needed and stuff like that. So
yeah, you can definitely do that. One of the coolest designs now that's probably going to be one that would be launched for a surface of the moon kind of mission is called the test article was called Krusty, but they tested that at the Nevada test site last year. It's a real nuclear reactor, but it's got a solid metallic core that's uranium molybdenum alloy, and it's got a slick design that makes it so that you don't need any control rods. If it gets too hot, it just swells up enough so that it cools itself back off again. So the reactivity drops back down just because of the thermal expansion of the core itself. And the core is really just like a beer can sized chunk of uranium molybdenum alloy. And that uses a heat pipe to carry the heat from the core up to a Stirling engine, and then radiators on top of that. So it looks like a chubby umbrella, and it kind of runs itself.
Wow. How long could it run? How long could it run for?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't think they've done long-term studies. Yeah, at a certain point, the fission products build up in the fuel and start to break it apart, and at that point, it becomes uncontrollable. So I don't know if they've torture tested the fuel to that point, but the project that I'm working on is for nuclear thermal propulsion. so that we're
Okay.
trying to make an extremely high temperature core. So it's a core that runs right up near the melting point, over the melting point of molybdenum, and almost to the melting point of tungsten. So that's like
Wow.
20
That's hot.
2750 Kelvin. Yeah, it's blazing hot. So and so the number of materials that you can use is very limited, and so we're trying to make the fuel for that project, which is just the coolest thing in the world, to be able to
Yeah.
if it launches, it'd be the one of the ideas is launching a manned mission to Mars. So that a manned mission to Mars would probably be toward the end of the 2030s, so like 2039. And
Yeah.
wouldn't that be cool to have like some kid who's in high school now is likely the commander of the mission? So that would be like the oldest, most experienced astronaut.
Y-
Would be somebody who's in high school right now, and all the other astronauts on that mission would be younger. They're like middle school, like my
Man,
daughter's age.
man, I can't wait. Like, I want my anti-gravity craft now. Yeah, yeah, and I feel like within our time, we will definitely get there, and it'll be much easier. And I think, man, the stuff that you're working on is so fascinating. It's really cool stuff. Like, so okay, so the heat is supposed to cause is causing the propulsion in some way then, huh? Just the particles and the radiation off of the craft?
Yeah, so the nuclear reaction heats up the core, and the core is made out of a tungsten or a tungsten molybdenum alloy. So Ron asked whether it's molybdenum disulfide or just molybdenum. It's got to be just molybdenum is good enough for the hot end, so it's molybdenum metal, and then toward the cold end. So that's like the top end of the core, and then down toward the hotter part of the core at the bottom, it's got to be at least 30% tungsten, so the melting point is high enough. But it's like a block of this metal with little bits of uranium nitride suspended in it, and then
Wild.
that heats up, and there are holes lengthwise going through it, and you shoot the hydrogen gas through the core, and it goes in one end cold and it comes out the other end hot, and it's so hot that's good enough for that's your propellant. So the
Wild.
back end of the rocket is really just like an open nozzle
Hot
that's got
gases.
hot hydrogen.
So
Yeah, so it's like a 25,000 pound thrust uh, motor, and the design right now has three of them. Actually, there's a picture of it
wow.
on the picture you posted that was, that from the Nuclear and Emerging Technologies that conference.
Yeah.
Right behind the speaker, there's a red box around the NTP Mars crew vehicle,
Yep.
and on the so that's like the wings on there are on each one of the modules that contains hydrogen, and on the very left side, of course you can't see it, but there's three tiny little nuclear reactors, and each one's got its own own nozzle, and so each one of those is 25,000 pounds of thrust. It's not a
Wow.
lot of thrust. It's actually real small. So all that has to be built in orbit, and so it would be built in high Earth orbit. So it's like orbit that's up as far away from Earth as the moon is, and then you don't have you don't need a lot of thrust to get out of the gravity well of the Earth.
Yeah.
And after you get out of the gravity well of the Earth, then you just like double check your bearings and burn again. It only takes like a half an hour of burn time before you're going fast enough, so that you got to cut the engines off, because if you're going too fast when you get to Mars, you won't be able to stop, and so that
Okay.
would suck, because
Yeah.
if you miss Mars, there's really I don't know what you do. You like just write a letter to your mom and send it home. You're like, dang, sorry.
Well, I would hope that you would have a reverse thruster or something that you could slow yourself down.
No,
with a little
there's
bit.
only one. There's only one. There's
Oh,
one thruster.
That's
Because
a bad design, I think.
well, you gotta everything's gotta be light, so you can't afford to have extra of anything. So you got enough propellant so that you can burn to get there, and then you got enough propellant so you can burn to slow down and stop. And there's not a lot of extra left over in case you screw up. So
flip around, inertia.
It's not
There you go.
It's not like missing your turn on the highway. You just like double check the GPS and it says recalculating, and then you go around the block and come back and try again. Yeah, you're in deep trouble if you miss your turn to Mars.
I like what Inertia said though. He said flip it around. So yeah, a smart, an intelligent astronaut could probably like rig it so that they could just flip the craft around and then try to burn the other way to slow down or something like that.
Yeah,
that's fun. That's fun, man. That's cool possibilities. Yeah, that was one of the things that another thing that I was going to talk to you about, but maybe we'll get to it next time. Was the Van Allen belts? Interested in talking to Hal about how they're going to mitigate some of that stuff. But I think we got like a couple of minutes left in the show. Really appreciate you coming on and chat with me today. It's always fun. A pleasure, man. Getting to talk to you and catching up. So, and then, you're always welcome back anytime you got some free time or anything to come on the show and have a chat.
I will.
So, really appreciate you, brother, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And if I don't get to chat with you soon, just enjoy life and keep on spreading the good word about what you're doing and spreading the education. Hopefully you come out with like a beekeeping ebook or something. I'm looking forward to that maybe.
Yeah. Well, I guess a little bit at a time, one post at a time. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, you could just like collect it and put it into a book or something. That would be cool.
All right. It was good talking to you. Bye.
You bet, brother. You have a good one. Yeah, thanks everybody for hanging out for the show today. We got Crimson Clad coming up with Steamwave Saturday, and we'll catch you next week on Meadows and Makers. Hope everybody has a great day, and peace be the journey. Catch you guys later. Sorry for
Hey, I'm Crimson Clad.
crap. Well, let me stop the recording.